Recording the extent to which behavior occurs more often sometimes than others. Scatterplot recording. Any aspect of the experimental setting that must be held constant is an extraneous variable. The extent to which the only change in behavior is because of the dependent variable, internal validity. A spoken verbal stimulus that evokes a written typed or finger-spelled response is taking dictation. Assessment that acknowledges the complex interrelation between environmental behavior is ecological assessment. Interview rating scales or questionnaires used to identify the maintaining reinforcer of a problem behavior is an indirect functional assessment. Serving the same purpose is functionally equivalent. Indirect procedures to identify and define the target behavior. Behavioral assessment. Antecedents and response share the same sense mode and resemble each other. That's form similarity. The degree to which a study's findings have generality is external validity. Steady state strategy is repeatedly implementing a condition to reduce extraneous variables. Ruling out simple before moving to complex explanation. That's parsimony. Multiple baseline designs applied to different locations is multiple baselines across settings. A systematic approach to the understanding of a natural phenomena is science. The prior level of responding cannot be reproduced as irreversibility. Someone who engages in verbal behavior is a speaker. Response evoked by a verbal SD with no point-to-point correspondence is an intraverbal. Behaviorism that understands a human behavior, including private events, is radical behaviorism. A duplicate where the form of a motor response is under the control of a visual verbal with similarities of motor imitation. Person who reinforces the speaker's behavior is a listener. Controlled comparison of the DB under the IB is experiment. Data that is not trending upward or downward is stable state baseline. A pattern of responding with little variation is steady state responding. A philosophical approach that views behavioral events that cannot be observed as outside the realm of science is methodological behaviorism. Natural science approach to the study of behavior is experimental analysis of behavior. The observation affecting the behavior being measured is reactivity. Using logic to compare the effects of two or more conditions is multiple treatment reversal design. Only behavior likely to produce naturally occurring reinforcement should be targeted. That's the relevance of behavior rule. The variation where baseline and or intervention starts and other legs are staggered. Delayed multiple baseline design. Higher order verbal cusp combining speakers and listener repertoires. Bidirectional naming. Objective observation of phenomena is empiricism. A single verbal response is a function of more than one variable. Convergent multiple control. A discrimination in which a verbal stimulus alters the function of another stimulus is verbal conditional discrimination. Behavior change by environmental variables independent of other people is automatic contingency. A hypothetical variable that falsely claims to explain the observed phenomena. Explanatory fiction. One or two short sessions are conducted for each condition. That's a brief functional analysis. Verbal behavior with formal similarity under the control of a verbal SD. Duplicate. Belief of integration to the maximum amount. That's normalization. A FA where conditions occur during naturally occurring opportunities is trial-based functional analysis. Target behaviors are appropriate and intervention procedures are acceptable is social validity. The truth of the statement depends on how effectively it guides action. Pragmatism. Behavior that produces covariation in other untrained behaviors is pivotal behavior. Members of a response class based on their common effect on the environment is a function-based definition. Defining behavior by shape or form is topography-based definition. Data points that do not consistently fall within a narrow range. Variable baseline. Covert events accessible only to a person. Private events. Verbal response is under the control of verbal stimulus with point-to-point correspondence with no formal similarity. Codic. Experimental technique that demonstrates the effects of reinforcement. DRA reversal technique. Two or more verbal SDs that each independently evoke behavior, but when combined evoke a specific response. Compound verbal discrimination. Multiple baseline design applied to different participants is multiple baselines across subjects. Experimental designs to compare two or more conditions. Multi-element designs. A variety of experimental designs that use baseline logic as a single case design. Improvements based on opportunity to perform as practice effect. The philosophy of science of behaviors. Vocal response evoked by a vocal purple cyst with formal similarities of coic. Assumption that the world is lawful and orderly. Determinism. A response evoked by a nonverbal discriminative stimulus. A verbal SD evokes a specific nonverbal behavior. Listening discrimination. Written response evoked by a written verbal SD is covering text. A response of any form evoked by an MO and followed by specific reinforcer, a MAND. Multiple baseline design applied to different behaviors of the same subject. Multiple baselines across behaviors. List of descriptions of scales and the conditions under which they should be observed. Behavioral checklist. Experimental design that alternates conditions to verify previous effects. Reversal design. AFA variation designed to increase efficiency. Interview-informed synthesized contingency. Systematic process for identifying the purpose of challenging behavior. The functional behavior assessment. A statement of the predicted outcome. Prediction. A presumed but unobserved process. Hypothetical construct. Variation of a multiple baseline with intermittent checks. Multiple probe design. Experimental design where participants choose between options based on distinct cues and reinforcement. Concurrent chase design. Experimental design with changing successive criterion for reinforcement or punishment. Changing criterion design. Continually questioning truth and validity of science is philosophical doubt. Each session of the FA is terminated when problem behaviors occur. Latency-based functional analysis. Exchanging the reinforcement contingencies for two different responses. A contingency reversal. Interaction between a speaker and a listener is a verbal episode. A single antecedent variable affects the strength of more than one response. Divergent multiple control. Experimental design with basic dimension ADA design. Repeating conditions in an experiment to determine effects. Replication. Demonstration of a functional relation between environmental variables and behavior is a functional analysis. Attack that occurs as a result of stimulus generalization. Tact extension. A response evoked by a written verbal SD with no formal similarity, but there is point-to-point correspondence. Textual. Likelihood that a target behavior will occur in each circumstance. Conditional probability. A behavior that exposes the learner to new environments. A behavioral cusp. Verbal behavior where the listener is affected by a specific response topography from the speaker. Topography-based. Experimental arrangements of antecedents and consequences. Functional analysis. Three-phase design that begins with a treatment condition. BAB design. Two interlocking levels of verbal behavior utterance. Autoclitic. A change of behaviors attributed to the manipulative functional relation. Experiment to determine the effects of different amounts of the independent variable. Parametric analysis. Behavior whose reinforcement is mediated by a listener. Verbal behavior. A single component evokes non-matching interverbal response. Simple verbal discrimination. Behavior change that has maximum impact on access to reinforcers and facilitation. Recording a descriptive temporally sequence account of behaviors, antecedents, and consequences of the anecdotal observation. Direct observation of antecedent behaviors, consequences in the natural environment. Descriptive functional behavior assessments. 5 types of verbal behavior. Elementary verbal operant. Repeating conditions to determine reliability is replication. A faulty explanation of behavior that assumes an inner cause. Mentalism. Experimental design with baseline intervention, ABAB design. Demonstration that prior baseline trends would remain if not for the independent variable. Verification. Relationship between the stimulus and the response for all parts match. Point-to-point contingency. Correspondence. A change in the function of a stimulus due to a verbal stimulus which modifies how an individual responds to the stimulus in the future. Verbal function altering behavior. Experimental control technique uses NCR as a control non-contingent reversal design technique. Type of sequence conditions in a study to draw conclusions. Experimental design.